We hear from a lot of people that tell us, like, I'm just cold all the time. Like, I'm freezing. Like, I want to sleep in the oven. So if you're a person that, like, you need like a parka and mittens, like, in your house, like, that's not a personality issue. There's physiological issues going on that are creating that problem. And the great news is that there's steps you can take to correct those malfunctions and improve the situation for you. Let's get warmed up.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to go through the most common underlying causes for this cold intolerance type issue, and then it's going to be up to you to figure out which one of these issues is most likely creating the problem for you. And if you can take steps to improve that problem, can you eat a salad without a ski mask on? So the first thing we want to look at is nutrient deficiencies. And when we look at this study here, sometimes to figure out a problem that we have going on, we have to look at what's going on with magnified versions of this, and this can give us insights of what may be creating trouble for us. So when we look at this study on nutritional needs in cold and in high altitude environments, this was an application for military personnel who go out in the cold, and what are the situations where a person can tolerate that more and not tolerate it so much. But when we're looking at physiological issues going on in the body, they say here that vitamins and minerals are essential to a myriad of physiologic functions, and a deficiency results in a wide variety of disorders. Among these disorders is the inability of mammals, we're mammals, remember that part? We're mammals, an inability of mammals to maintain body temperature adequately in the cold. So this happens to be the scenario that I see with my clients. When I'm seeing clients come to me and they say they're cold all the time, in a lot of scenarios, they're clients that appear to be dealing with mineral deficiencies. And we also go on to see here that when a chronic deficiency state occurs with the minerals copper, zinc, or iron, it is clear that poor thermoregulation will occur. And they kind of also talked about in this study, and I'm going to put a link to this study in the description below this video so you can dig deeper into this if you want to. But they talked a lot about, even though we're talking about some of these specific minerals a lot, there appears to be issues where a wide variety of minerals. So I don't want you to view this as, oh, I just need to supplement with copper, zinc, and iron and I'm going to be all toasty. I don't think that's the way that it really works, and some people may be able to take that step, and if that significant deficiency was causing the problem for them, that may help, but in most cases it's a little bit deeper than that. And what we want to look at is, why would a person not be bringing in enough minerals? And in most cases, a person is having digestive malfunctions. So if you're having any type of digestive symptoms at all, any burping or bloating or acid reflux or constipation or diarrhea or nausea or indigestion, maybe food just kind of sits there like a rock in your stomach for 6 hours, or even skin or acne issues, all of those are signs that your digestion is not working correctly, and when it's not working correctly, you're not really breaking down your food and getting all of the nutrients and all of the minerals out of that food. So we need stomach acid working correctly, we need bile flowing out of this gallbladder working correctly, we need things shooting out of this pancreas to help us digest our food correctly. All of those functions have to be working correctly. I talk about that in a lot more depth in about 700 other videos, so I won't go into a lot of that here. But if you're dealing with digestive malfunctions, improving those can help you access the minerals in the foods that you're eating. So my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, kind of walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and what steps can help you improve those. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below where you can get the whole thing totally for free, and then you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4 to figure out what steps are going to help you improve your digestion so you can get more minerals out of the food that you're eating. So that's going to be a really important topic when we're looking at allowing the body to function correctly, allowing it to regulate that body temperature. And in a lot of cases, the body will prioritize situations according to survival. So to you, you may really want to be warmed up, but the body may have other priorities where it's going to put this smaller amount of resources toward these other priorities, and then that body temperature regulation kind of suffers a little bit. And on this particular topic, it appears that iron and B12 are some nutrients that are very commonly deficient when a person is having trouble with body temperature. And so if a person is vegan or something and they're not eating any animal protein, that can make it harder to access these nutrients. And they may say, oh, well, I'm eating these vegetables, that has lots of iron in there. But it's a different type of iron in vegetables than you find in animal proteins. And some of those types of iron in the animal proteins are easier to assimilate and utilize. And again, these issues, when you're not accessing those nutrients in the food, like if somebody isn't a vegan and they're still low on iron or B12, then that comes back to these digestive symptoms. And that comes back to an inability to break the food down and access the nutrients in that food. And a really important thing when it comes to iron and this body temperature regulation, we go back to this study where they say that iron deficiency anemia results in decreased oxygen transport from the lungs to tissues, and this reduction in oxygen availability inhibits physiological responses to cold, including peripheral vasoconstriction, a heat-conserving process, and increased metabolic rate, a heat-generating process. So it seems like when you don't have that iron there to help the oxygen get to where it needs to be, that you kind of lose the ability to regulate that heat or to generate heat from your own body. And one thing to think about when we're looking at that oxygen is like to really burn energy. A lot of times this being cold all the time is about an energy production problem. And to really burn energy, we know that we need oxygen. To burn anything, you need oxygen. If you smother a fire, then it doesn't burn anymore because there's no oxygen. That oxygen is needed there. And what they're saying in that study is that if there's not enough iron, then the oxygen can't get down to the tissues where it needs to be to create that energy. But there can be other issues that can create oxygen utilization as well. If your blood is leaning too far on the alkaline side, our blood stays within a very narrow pH range. But if it leans a little bit too far on that alkaline side, which can happen for a wide variety of reasons, what's called the Bohr effect kicks in. And the Bohr effect tells us that when the blood is leaning too alkaline, oxygen can't get down to the tissues where it needs to be utilized. The oxygen is kind of trapped in the blood. So your doctor will put a pulse oximeter on your finger and be like, oh man, your oxygen's great, way to go. But if this blood is leaning too alkaline, the oxygen can't get to the tissues where it needs to be, so it's not really getting utilized. So in this scenario, according to this study, it helps us understand that that oxygen utilization issue can create these body temperature problems. And one thing that you can do to get an idea of where your blood pH might be ranging, this is not a diagnostic thing, but this is something that we use with our clients, is you can just relax and set your little phone timer for a minute and then breathe normally and just count the number of inhales that you take in a 60-second period. So 1 minute. And you're not going to count the inhales as 1 and the exhale as 2, just count the inhales. Now, if those inhales are 12 or less in a minute, that's a sign that the blood is leaning a little bit more on that alkaline side. And maybe taking steps to improve that scenario could help you utilize oxygen better so that you can regulate that body temperature a little bit. So if a person looked at their breath rate and it was like 7 or something like that in a minute, then that's a really strong sign that the blood is probably leaning a little too far on that alkaline side. And we'll put a link in the description below for our video on oxygen utilization so you can dig into that a little bit more and how to improve that scenario if that's a problem for you. But that can be a really big deal for a lot of people in this scenario where they're, hey, I'm so cold. And the next thing we want to think about is if a person's having some type of hypoglycemic response. And keep in mind that we talked about that this body temperature issue is a lot about energy production kind of an issue. And so when we eat carbs and glucose and sugars, then now the body has a fuel source. And the body should be able to operate on fat and other fuel sources. It should have backup plans intact. But for some people, when they eat carbohydrates or glucose, that insulin kind of helps process that glucose a little bit too aggressively. We understand that a lot of people become insulin resistant and that they're not processing glucose correctly because the cells are not listening to that insulin. So when an imbalance can happen in one direction, that means it must be able to happen in the other direction. And that's what we're seeing a lot of times when we're looking at hypoglycemia issues. The insulin is processing that glucose too aggressively, so when they get any kind of sugar spike, it creates an aggressive sugar crash. So when that sugar crash happens, now the body doesn't have a fuel source. And maybe the person is not adapted to burning fat for fuel. Some people get stuck in a case where the body wants to burn glucose for fuel and it's not very good at burning fat for fuel. Maybe they're eating in a way where the body can't access fat. If we're eating a lot of carbs and sugars all day long, that can restrict our body's ability to access that stored fat. So if you starve yourself, if you're just fasting and you're not eating, the body says, okay, there's no fuel coming in, so I'm going to kind of slow these motors down a little bit. I'm going to slow down what's happening so that I can allow this fuel to extend its life period a little bit. So when we fast, we kind of slow those processes down, that metabolic function, and that can lower our body temperature a little bit. But even if you're not fasting, if you're having a hypoglycemic sugar crash, the body still views that like you are fasting, like you are starving, because there's not a fuel source for the body to use there. So it has to dip into these other backup fuel sources, and in some cases there's problems that restrict that from happening. So in those scenarios, it's going to be like there's a starvation situation, and the person's really going to be cold most of the time. And another point just to kind of look at when we're looking at starvation, like if you're really lean and you don't have a lot of body fat, when I'm really lean, like depending on how I'm training, if I'm very lean, if I go out in the cold, I get a lot cold. I get very cold. Like I'm not nice when I'm that cold, just because I don't have any kind of thermal protection there. There's no insulation to kind of keep you warm. So that can be a factor. But in most cases where someone's just cold in the house, there's usually some of these other issues going on. Another thing to think about is a hypothyroid issue. We have this thyroid hormone that kind of helps our cells kind of create that energy, and sometimes if there's not enough of that thyroid hormone to help the body function correctly, it can result in this, oh man, I'm really cold situations. And what's interesting about this hypothyroid issue is that in a lot of cases there's a problem where the body can't convert T4 to T3, and that T3 is the active thyroid hormone that kind of helps all these functions happen correctly. When we think about why couldn't that convert like that, well, a lot of times the liver is in charge of converting that T4 to T3. It does a lot of that conversion. And the liver also has a lot of other jobs. It's filtering all the toxins out of the body. It does a lot of things. And when it filters those toxins out of the body, it puts a lot of that into the bile that goes into the gallbladder there. And for a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, that bile can become too thick and sticky to flow correctly, and then it won't come down and help us digest our food. It kind of restricts our ability to access a lot of the minerals and vitamins in the food because we don't have all these sides of digestion working correctly. So that could be part of that problem where we were looking at those nutrient deficiencies. But also, if the bile's not flowing, it can't go through the intestinal tract carrying all the toxins that the liver filtered out of the body and carry those toxins down and out the back door when we poop like a champion. So now the liver has to filter all those toxins out again, and it gets overwhelmed and it can't do all of the jobs that it has. So a lot of times when we see people that are having trouble converting that T4 to T3, when we can improve this bile flow issue and allow the liver to function a little bit better and not be overwhelmed, then it has the ability to create that conversion, and we see improvements with those hypothyroid issues with some folks. So when we're looking at this wide variety of issues that can create trouble with keeping the body warm, we can see that some of them may be connected. They might have problems together. If you have digestive issues that aren't allowing you to bring in these minerals, now you're having this oxygen utilization issue because there's not enough iron in there, and maybe the digestive malfunctions are also restricting the body from detoxing correctly, and now the liver can't function correctly and help you convert this thyroid stuff. So a person could have layers of these issues going on, which makes it a little bit tricky to figure out what's the step that's really going to help me. And a person, if they find out that, okay, I do have these digestive issues, my bile is not flowing well, they might have to go through and fix one thing at a time and just kind of work through that, and all of a sudden they realize, hey, I haven't even pulled my mittens out of the drawers this week. I must be feeling a little bit warmer. So this isn't the kind of video where you're just going to say, oh, there's a remedy, I just go and take that and everything's going to be great. That doesn't work because most issues have a variety of underlying causes like we're looking at here. So there's never going to be one remedy that's going to fix this for every person. It's going to take effort to figure it out. But that book that I told you how to get for free in the description below this video, that shows you how to run some simple self-tests at home using tools you can pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store to get an idea of what kind of digestive malfunctions may be going on. Where are my mineral levels in the body? How is that going? How is my oxygen utilization looking? And how is my energy production going? Am I leaning too far on that sugar burning side? And do I need to take steps so that my body can burn both glucose and fat for fuel? It kind of walks you through figuring out which areas really need help for you. And then you're not taking all the steps, you're just taking the steps that are appropriate for you and your unique bio-individuality. So I hope that helps you figure out some answers for yourself. And since that gallbladder issue seems to be problematic in a variety of those things that we talked about there, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow to see if any of those issues are showing up for you, and then you know you need to put some effort into that. I can't wait to hear about your results.